It was hard being the second wife. I felt like I had to be very different than your previous spouse, and I wanted to impress your family, and that's unrealistic. Welcome back to Smarter Wealth. This is the podcast where we talk about real life. We talk about real change and how to navigate it all without losing our minds. So excited to join a very special guest, my husband, Dan Hummert. Let's dig in.
So I think what's important for us to really dig into is blended families and the impact that parents may have not only on the child within the blended family, but also the emotions that the parents themselves go through, the non-biologic parent, what that parent feels, integrating oneself into a unit that once was, that is now not, and now finding themselves thrusted in the midst of all that emotion that takes place between the biological parent and the child. And they're just like, do I fit in or don't I fit in? Like, how do I fit in? What do I do? So, I mean, that's a very loaded topic. So
we could break that down into 4 or 5 different points, like you said, but I think legitimately, when a blended family comes together, you are trying to recreate a new sense of family and unity. And I don't know if it's lucky or unlucky for us. It was the first time we were doing this, and we don't know what we're doing,
right,
but we have wonderful intention. We know we're trying to go at it the most cohesive and loving way. God-fearing way as well, and create a family. And we have to register that it is still not biological. And we may have fallen in love with each other at a rate that's different than the rate that the children fall in love with each other, or the non-biological parent and non-biological child fall in love with each other. And so giving each other the room to fall in love, and that time can take, that can take a lot of time.
And it might never even happen. Might never happen, right? There are those really situations, right? That's depends. I think the expectations are an important part of the conversation, is to set some clear expectations, neither too high nor too low, but to grow with the relationship as it develops over time.
Yeah. And, I think that including the children in that conversation is also vital, and setting clear expectations that your intention is to grow in the deepest state of family unity as possible, and that it's okay that we might have misaligned feelings sometimes, but the children need to know that's the goal. That's where we're going. And that we as the parent are going to be working really hard to do that.
So what are some of the things that we can do as parents to help facilitate a closer relationship between a non-biologic father or mother and a child?
Well, I think number one is not setting unrealistic expectations on timelines. In our scenario, it was a handful of years before we lived in the same house, and we even lived separate for almost a year once married.
Just because of geographic distance,
Sure. And I had 2 children still in the home, and one was a senior in high school. And so that was a big decision, that it was best for him to finish high school in his environment and wait to move. And that doesn't mean that it wasn't very difficult. It was very difficult on our daughter at that point to move schools and move into an 8th grade year in the middle of the summer in a new city and a new house, new school, new friends. So that was very difficult, but I think it was a realistic expectation that we had to create an environment that was best for the children at that time, and we put our own needs second.
Right. So children's needs come first.
They do.
Our needs come last. Just because we fell in love doesn't necessarily mean that the children are going to fall in love with us as a unit. So I think it was very important for us to make that very clear. But I think some of the things that we can do and did do, certainly I attribute a lot to you, is just open communication and just sit down, just call it for what it is. Just say, hey, we know that this is not your desire. This is not your plan. And frankly, it wasn't our plan either.
Right.
Right?
But welcome to the world.
Welcome to the real world. Right. Shit happens. So it happened. Divorces weren't in our plans either. Now, coming together, we find ourselves in a new reality. Children find themselves in this new reality, but we just have to come alongside them and then give them what they need, constantly recognizing that this wasn't their plan, and we foster a spirit of empathy, of recognizing what they're going through, and then build on that with some family memories, new family memories.
Yeah, I think being very intentional about creating time and space to spend together. And I think there's been countless times where it's very easy to tell when the children are not as engaged as we are.
Right.
We're having a lot of fun, and they're like, okay, get me out of here, I'm done. And we can't take that always personal. Right. There were plenty of times where I think my mood would change because I could tell immediately that one of the children were not engaging.
Right.
But I had to check myself and my emotional state because they're going to feed off of me also. They're looking to me as their mom.
Right.
How do I adjust to this? What's okay? What's not okay? So I had to check my own self at the door a handful of times and have some tough conversations. And there were times where it would make me very frustrated. And I know I can remember a very, very sad moment when, and it makes me emotional thinking about it, but we were all having dinner together and one of the children went to the bathroom and it was taking a long time for them to come back to the table. And later we went and checked on that kiddo and they were crying in the bathroom.
Right. I remember that, honey.
And, that's heartbreaking. And that makes you as parents think,
right,
are we doing this for the right reasons?
Right.
But I think at the same time,
and you questioned it too.
I sure as hell did.
You questioned, I'm just going to be a solo mom. You and I had some really tough
conversations.
Right. And carry on. And
yeah, I mean, I didn't see you coming. I thought I can do this single parent thing. I can do this.
Right.
I did it for a long time. And now, I mean, love is important and I love you very much. And maybe we can be married and fall in deeper love in 10 years from now.
Right.
And we can just live this separate life so I can raise my children.
Type of thing. Right.
But I think that God just kept putting it heavy on my heart that that's also selfish and that our children also deserve to see how two people love each other and that sometimes being biologic families, as beautiful as the God intended space and in time, that's the God intended way, but in our life that unfortunately wasn't the path. And it is still beneficial to these children, whether or not it takes them longer to accept this because we have a healthy relationship. This is not an unhealthy second marriage, second loving relationship, right? There are lots of relationships that are unhealthy, but I feel like the love and the loving relationship that we had for one another was a very healthy support system that our children could learn from.
So there's a model there, right? You're building a model. Yes. Yeah, it's a model that they can see when the father, let's just take it from the child's perspective for a moment, when that child can grow up in a loving family that once was not and now is, that's something that child can then take with him or her into a nuclear family and by God's will, perhaps that child will hopefully have a nuclear family for the rest of his or her life.
Right.
Right. But yet, some of the benefits of seeing a loving family, dad loves mom, right? Mom loves dad. This is the way it's supposed to be. There's healthy conversation. There's a move towards finding emotional well-being, right, and relational well-being.
Absolutely.
And so, the natural extension of that is if it does not occur, and then there's frustration, or maybe there's a level of maturity that may have yet to develop, on a co-parent's part, where they're not getting what they perceive to be a reciprocating love from the stepchild, if you will, or the non-biologic child. Hey, you just got to set those expectations a little lower and recognize that might never happen, right? And that's okay. That's okay. But just keep trying. Just keep giving it your all. Show that love. Show that respect.
Your timeline and your needs are going to be different than the non-biological child coming into a situation that they didn't frankly ask for.
They didn't ask for it.
Right.
Right.
And they're being told, hey, this is what's happening. This is our new path. And we love you. We want to give you space, but you got to get on board because the ship's leaving the harbor.
And that was a decision that you had made, going from, I'm just going to sail on my own ship by myself, right, with my children. But you chose to have a co-captain.
Yes. And now my co-captain, I think, is one of the, the greatest gifts of my life. And I couldn't be happier where we are today. And
Same.
I think that being consistent and being kind and open to timelines and putting some of our own emotional baggage and checking it out the door and putting some of the kids' stuff first has given them the room to be emotional and say what they say or say what they feel, and it's okay.
Yeah.
Their feelings are relevant and they need to know it, and that there's time and space for every single emotion that they have.
And I think the other component too to add to that is, if you take it from an emotionally healthy perspective, is to foster a support of the child's biological parent, right? And to come alongside the child's needs and to speak positively about that other individual, not to include that child in the affairs that may be negative, right? Which might have resulted in that breakup of that nuclear family. Stay clear of that. And I can speak to a personal situation, as you know, with my two children, Ashley and August, where they were kind of brought into some things by my former spouse that were not appropriate for them to have. And that's colored their framework. And I applaud you that what you have done is you've always supported, you've always spoken so positively of your former spouse. And I think that they can work wonders in the sense of keeping the children out of the middle, which is so vital, is the children need to stay out of the middle.
Yep.
They are not part of it.
It's not their fault.
It is.
Their relationship with their parent is not your relationship with your former spouse, period.
Exactly right.
End of story. And all too many times, our adult emotions cloud our ability to separate those things.
Yes.
And
so we're wrapped up into it emotionally, right? We just
and it's very unhealthy.
And it's
right?
exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean that there's not strife and very, very difficult things as adults that we go through behind closed doors. It's just not fair for our children to have to deal with that. They should never be brought into the middle. And there's a lot of situations that I think any of us, if we have friends that have been divorced or other family members that have been divorced, and you see it all too soon that parent or kiddos are sometimes made to choose sides because the parent is not
able to separate.
Strong enough in self that they need their child to be on their side.
That's exactly right.
And that is so emotionally unhealthy for that kiddo.
Yeah.
And for the parent.
And for the parent, right. Yep. And then those emotions spill into other facets,
They do.
namely financial,
Yeah.
right? And then they're like, okay, I'm not going to support the whatever the financial needs are of that child because, I frankly disagree.
Right.
And whether you disagree or you don't, you're just saying you disagree because you're mad, right? It's that classic conversation that husbands and wives have. It's once said that men see things in conversations that are more topically related, and females tend to see things that are more emotionally related. Like,
I'm going to take that as a positive.
What are you really saying?
It's true. We ladies, we are a little more emotional than our loving spouses.
Right.
But
like, I'm like, get to the point. Okay, what is it? And I'm like, well, really? And then I get
I mean, I need you to hear me. I need you to understand the words coming out of my mouth.
No, you don't. You need me to really understand the emotion that's behind the words coming out of your mouth.
That's true. I need you to, I really do. I need you to feel it. But to your point, there are also other conversations that clearly should stay topical.
Right.
And we do need to leave the emotion out of it because it can go into a negative space. And that's not helpful.
So that's an interesting point, and that's a suggestion for some people who are struggling with that, is to really, when they're having some of those heavy conversations about children, biologic, non-biologic, in their relationship, is to really separate what is topical from what is emotional and really get to that heart, But you have to do a couple things, I think. They have to set the right space and time to have those conversations, right? You can never have a child within earshot. It always needs to be a place where you have privacy and the child is not included. And then, of course, the most important thing, too, is to never approach the conversation from a you standpoint or I mean by that accusatory standpoint, right? Position those statements from the I perspective and say, I'm feeling this way. I'm struggling with this. Do you see the same thing? Do you see what I'm talking about? And then begin the conversation that way.
Yeah, I think active listening is a part of it. And I think as adults, whether it's with any relationship in your life, it can even be a work environment, but especially with your partner and spouse, the active listening is so vital. I know in our world, we've realized after a lot of conversation that eye contact ensures active listening, because there are many times where I will start a conversation with you and you are not giving me eye contact. And then I get frustrated because you didn't hear a damn thing that just came out of my mouth. I'm like, where are you? We're having a conversation.
Hey, listen, it's happened. We all have things that come into our life that our brains are going towards. I tend to squirrel a little bit more than you do. So, I recognize that that's something I need to work on, but
sometimes we just have to call it out. Okay, that was a squirrel moment. Let's redirect. Let's come back to what we were talking about.
But there's a squirrel there, right?
But active listening is so vital because I know a lot of times where I will speak for myself, as you just suggested, right? I will start working on my rebuttal when you have a very good point and I'm not really listening to your point. I'm more focused on how I'm going to beat you at that point. And that's not helpful. Absolutely. Sometimes I do.
There's competition? I didn't know that.
There shouldn't be, but of course there is.
Yeah. I think I find that a lot within a financial practice as a financial advisor working with clients of all ages. Being able to provide that active listening skill is vital. And so that's so important. And I think one of the key ways of doing it is obviously with a focused attention, repeating back what you heard. So let me see if I understood you, right? Along those lines. And re-clarifying for them what they said. And if you put it in those terms, as I find in practice, that other party, that client, will come right back and say, nodding of the head, yes. And then what you end up with, or I end up with as a practitioner, is more information.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I do that with you and you don't even know it.
Well, I think there's plenty of times where I go, no, what are you saying? That's absolutely not what I
Yeah, that
said,
happens
Hummert.
too.
Let's talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah. I get it wrong. I get it wrong. But,
Yeah, right.
it's, yeah.
You
It's
do
just,
nothing wrong.
oh, well, you're too kind. I do love you.
Well, I think just going back to the emotional impact, I think that there's also just a lot of anxiety and insecurity around the emotional impact of blended families in general. And when you think about what the emotional toll, what the relational toll is, there's always going to be that financial piece to it. And you don't want it to take a financial toll, and you don't want your emotions to
Right.
to affect healthy financial decisions whenever
Right.
you're bringing together.
Yeah, I think that's also a segue into the perspective from the child,
Yeah.
right? And I think that child, if you get behind the child's brain for a second, it's like if I'm hearing conflict going on, right? Or if I'm hearing some tension, I may have already come from a household where tension was so great that it led to the destruction of that nuclear family.
Sure.
Now I find myself thrusted in this new family, like, whoa, we don't need that happening again.
Right.
So being cognizant of that and getting behind the child's mind in the sense of, God forbid something happens to my biological parent, what's going to happen to me, right?
Yeah.
Who's going to take care of me, right? Where do I fit into this? Am I going to be loved and cared for? And I think that's a
very big topic and an age appropriate conversation that should probably be had. Clearly, a very different conversation depending on the age of your children, but coming together in a blended family and planning ahead it's a vital top of the list
Right.
step. And those are very difficult conversations to sit down with those kids and say, we just have to plan for the worst and hope for the best here. But this is what we're thinking, and we want to know your opinion.
Now, it doesn't mean that the child's brought into the financial conversations, depends upon the age, but it is
Right.
also important for the parents to then inculcate in the child's lessons, if you will, learning a financial plan.
Right.
Some I sense of how to manage money, right? It's just so long as they're getting that. And that their needs to say, hey, this is what we're covering, this is what was expected of you. Right. So it all depends upon the age of the child, naturally, and their capability of taking some of those issues on. Yeah. I would like to jump up a little bit in the generation perspective and talk about some parents.
Yeah.
Aging parents
Absolutely.
in a blended family circumstance. That's a big one. Dig into that one.
Well, I mean, talk about kids trying to fall in love with your spouse who you fell in love with first.
Yeah.
I think parents have their own path of coming alongside this new
boy.
life, and
And siblings?
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think our scenario is our parents are very different, and their ages are different, and different lives, very different lives. I'll speak for myself, but coming into your family, I can envision my own feelings being similar to a child, and that I desperately wanted to be accepted by your mom and dad. It was hard being the second wife, the girlfriend. I'm too old to be a girlfriend. I mean, my age and girlfriend, like, that doesn't seem to go together.
Yeah.
So that, like, the persona of what that seemed to be defined as, I didn't want to be that. And
Right.
there was a level of, do I need to, I have to be myself, but I felt like I had to be very different than your previous spouse, and I wanted to impress your family. And that's unrealistic. I don't think that is because your mom made me feel that way or your dad made me feel that way.
That was you
because
putting that on yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But that's human nature. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
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 I felt the same way. I mean, I think, certainly I wanted with your mom and dad to feel the exact same way and not, and make you proud, right?
Right.
And to be accepted in their eyes, even when I came to them and asked for your hand in marriage,
Right.
right? Those are some big moments. But having gotten through many days and times and interactions with them, I saw that relationship develop. And the same with you. And my mom and dad loved you, and that's my a diamond on your hand that my dad gave my mom. The mom gave that to you.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
the sweetest
Now, unfortunately, he's
gift.
deceased, and miss him very much. But every time I see that, I think of him. Yeah.
Yeah. Having the support from your family means the world.
Yeah.
There's a deep breath freedom moment that says, okay, this next step is accepted, because whether we get along with our parents all the time or not, we're always seeking their approval.
That's right.
End of story. We
Right.
can be, however old, and we always want to make our parents proud.
Right.
And so,
Yeah. Talk a little bit about some of the financial responsibilities that are going to come with on our behalf on behalf of our parents, right? And how that within a blended family environment can really cause some friction and tension. How can we address that and talk a little bit more about releasing some of it in a way, or some steps that could be considered to foster a much deeper emotional and relational well-being?
well, I think you have to be able to have open conversations, just as we're talking about with our children. We have to plan ahead, and having a deeper relationship with your parents is going to foster some of those conversations that are hard to have with aging parents.
Depends upon their financial circumstances, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and those are the questions you need to be able to dig into, and I think sometimes there is a time and space for just the biologic kid and parent to have those conversations, but there are also, in a very warm and loving environment, the new spouse or second spouse, depending on how long you're married, it doesn't matter anymore.
Well,
And you can
exactly. The
consider.
tension can come into when financial resources are going to be required on behalf of the blended family unit to cover that other that parent or parents, right? And the non-biologic individual who may require to dig deep into their respective financial resources to pay for some of that care, that can be tough. That can be really tough,
Yeah,
and you're loving your spouse more, right? To be able to accommodate and make those financial sacrifices, that can be really hard.
Yeah.
So I think having and bringing the aged parents into a financial healthy conversation realistically about what is a plan, right? Do you have long-term care cover, right? Do you have the financial resources to take you to life expectancy, right? And I think that's where professional advice comes in.
Sure. Yes, because those are very difficult conversations anyway. But as you are digging into wanting to make sure your parents are well cared for, if in the situation you find that they might not have what they need, the reality is you and your siblings, or just you have to be prepared to bring them in home and care for them yourself, or
Right.
be able to hire a nurse to care for your parents in their home. And that might change your personal financial plan. Maybe you were able to save college for kids, but you didn't really have this on your radar that,
Right.
oh, wait a second, I should have been saving to help my parent pay for
Yes. Yes.
expenses in their aging years, and that can put a lot of strain on a relationship.
So I think having in a blended family environment, a husband and wife coming together and saying, "Hey, are your mom and dad covered?" right? If not, I would encourage you to sit down with your mom and dad and a financial planner that they may or may not have engaged and say, let's talk about this,
Yeah.
right? And what are going to be some of your responsibilities and or your siblings potentially in taking care of their needs, so that you're handling yours, I'm handling mine, and you just hope and pray that they've got a decent plan in place. But then also set expectations that if it will require our respective financial resources in a pooled environment, right, that we're okay with it.
Right.
That to your point, it's not just hitting you like a ton of bricks. You're like, whoa, this just blew our plan out of the water.
Right. Yeah, and then you bring in siblings. And
Yes.
sometimes there are varying degrees of sibling rivalry or just non-existent relationships, and they can clearly see things very differently.
Yeah.
I'm sure you see that in your
I see
practice
that a lot, yes.
A lot.
I'll tell you the one surefire way, if it's not handled right, to blow up a sibling dynamic is to bring money in the middle. You bring money in the middle and poof. Boy, oh boy, without those clear expectations. One sibling might take control, say, I got this all to myself. And I think the one thing that I've always advised those siblings is to bring them together and have a conversation and make sure everybody's on the same page. Now, resources from a parent may not go equally to each one. That's up to the parent to decide. But I think bringing the siblings into the conversation so that they stay in nuclear is most important.
Yeah, it reminds me of another conversation we've had where when we talk about planning for college for our younger kids or even grandkids, as parents, one of the greatest gifts we can do is really get things organized and prepared for our kids.
Right.
And that doesn't just mean young parents, middle-aged parents. That means older parents also, with adult parents and grandkids, great-grandkids.
Yeah.
That's the kindest thing you can do for your kids. Keep it, be prepared, organized, and don't make a mess of making your children have to fight over it.
Yep. Yes. Yeah. And that's the planner's job is to get proper titling and registrations in line on various accounts, maybe consolidating them within one custodian so it's easier if at the time of passing for assets to be distributed according to their estate plan, making sure the estate plan is all buttoned up. And then have a clear understanding of who the executor or executrix might be to settle that estate. I think that's critical, just to have, and maybe a visit with the estate planning attorney or financial advisor would be very helpful so that everybody's kind of on the same page in terms of what to expect, because it can lead to some mismatched expectations and eventual rivalry or just friction.
Yeah.
Between those parties remaining.
Yeah, I think I could name on one hand right now different scenarios in people that are close to us who have a good financial planner and who do not.
Yep.
And what does that conversation look like when something happens to your parent?
Mm-hmm.
I know you are one of the first calls when one of your clients pass away, when that family says, oh my gosh, now what? What do we do?
Right. Mom died, dad died.
Right. And so what happens when you don't even know who your mom and dad's financial advisor is? And if they have even trusted them, they've just stayed with them because they've been with them for 30 years and you have no idea.
Right. Right.
So it's just so vital to have those conversations.
These are the challenges, not just for blended families, but nuclear families as well.
Yep.
But I think within a blended families, we're talking about it in depth, is also to be very careful to recognize cognitive decline.
Right.
Cognitive decline, as people have longer life expectancies, is becoming more of an issue. And so sometimes cognitive decline will just creep up on us, right? At some point, and you have to know when to step in and to be able to say, hey, mom and dad, or encourage your spouse, right? They might not be your nuclear parents, right? But they are your biological step parents, right?
Right.
And then to encourage your spouse to seek professional advice, to say, look, cognitive decline is observable here, what are some of the steps that we can do to
help.
help
Yeah, I mean, I
keep
can't
from
imagine what
fraud?
that's going to feel like later in life when our kids come to us and say, it's time to take the keys, Mom.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
we love you and you're going to hurt someone.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to fight.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's freedom. I don't want my freedom taken away.
Right.
So we have to be very sensitive to some of that, the emotional ties to that freedom that our aging family members have.
I know. And to take the steps, whether they require in-home care, maybe they could require assisted living or independent, I should say, and then assisted. So I think, and then helping them evaluate places that would be appropriate if they go from living on their own to living in a independent living environment, right? It's not easy to find those places today, right? We have a society with an aging population and a large number of them that are seeking proper care. And so it's important to encourage those helping them make decisions to get on those wait lists, because it can take a while to be able to find a place that's adequate and is affordable, because that is a tremendous cost. Yeah, the average stay in assisted living is typically about three years, a little bit more than 3 years, and it can cost anywhere between $7,000 to $10,000 a month, depends upon whether memory care is needed or not. So that's a tough conversation financially to bring somebody to and awaken them to what that cost reality is.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think, in the big scheme of things here, whether we're talking about children or aging parents, our goals are understanding that emotional impact. That's why we're having these conversations, because emotional wellness, relational wellness are vital for success in our overall lives, but that also leads to financial wellness. They are completely intertwined and integrated. It's as matrixed as it can be, right? A very matrixed environment.
And to be smart about those, the times in which you can step in, have those conversations, right, to foster wellness.
Yeah, foster wellness. The goal is always that cohesion and teamwork, right? You are a family unit, and how best to foster cohesion and teamwork and minimize any negative emotional impact.
Correct. Right. And it also begins with getting knowledge financially and unbiased knowledge, right? Financial knowledge that gives you what you need to help to you and or those your loved ones around you make those decisions that are in the best interest of your family, so that you can maintain that wellness and your own individual well-being, because nothing's worse than having sibling fraction or children issues or whatever dynamic might exist. I think at the heart of it is just having a deeper understanding of some of these key concepts financially, and with a mindset that you're going to explore through open communication. Some of them. Not everybody's willing to have that. And there are things, there are the people and professionals that you can turn to help open that up, possibly, if someone is the least bit willing. But those are the most important takeaways, in my opinion.
Well, thanks for being here.
Well, thank you,
This was a fun conversation.
Yeah, as always.
Yes.